self-love actually often starts precisely when we feel that we've experienced some sense of loss, some profound sense of, either we feel alone in the world, we feel like we've lost ourselves, we've had a trauma, we've had some profound sense of betrayal, and we feel the need to connect with a power that is greater than our thinking mind. We're trying to be a good, we're trying to be helpful, we're trying to, become specialized in some way, but we miss our wholeness. We lose our capacity to be connected to our wholeness. And that's where you typically see people, like, for example, stuck in their heads. They're all about, trying to think good thoughts, or they're all about, I got to get my degree, I got to go to school, and I got to win people's approval, right? So approval seeking becomes, for many people, a substitute to actually feeling that sense of safety from feeling inherently lovable. And that's what is in so many people's child mind, as I put it. The child mind has lost a sense of connection to its own inherent lovability, and instead is just looking for ways to feel okay, that I have some sense of belonging, that I'm not going to be abandoned, that I can, that I can fit in. And that's a very different experience. That, as you can imagine, would bring about a continuous feelings of insecurity, anxiety, self-doubt. And of course, for some people, it turns into toxic self-criticism. I'm just not good enough. I'm just not enough. No matter what I do, no matter how smart I get, no matter how good looking I am, no matter, how much people tell me I'm okay, I still don't feel that I'm okay. When we engage in self-loving practices, we stimulate our brain to producing more dopamine. So automatically, we're naturally filled with feelings of pleasure and enjoyment and reward. We feel that we are being naturally rewarded from what we're doing in our life. So that reduces the stress, the anxiety, the competitive drives. All the negative drives associated with survival are reduced because we're flooded with dopamine. We also are, by being more self-loving, we're reducing cortisol in our system. So our stress system is actually deactivated. And so with all of that happening, we're more present, we're able to be more focused, we're positively engaged with ourselves and with others. And therefore, we're stepping out of autopilot. That negative chattering mind is subdued because we feel more connected with our positive wholeness, our positive sense of self.
Cures, Remedies, and Beyond podcast with Dr. Irina, a Stanford-trained medical doctor, inventor, and a published author with over 30 years of clinical experience, is bringing together the science of medicine and the art of healing for ultimate vitality and health. It engages in discussions with healthcare providers, wellness experts, innovators, philosophers, spiritual and industry leaders, as well as health and wisdom seekers to provide you, the listeners, with practical tips and knowledge to help optimize your health and well-being. The Cures, Remedies, and Beyond podcast with Dr. Irina.
Welcome to the show. Our topic today is self-love. According to some statistics, 85% of the world's population are affected by low self-esteem or self-worth. There is a multi-billion-dollar industry dedicated to self-care, around $450 billion to be precise. And while self-care practices are an important part of cultivating self-love, including shopping, including bubble baths, massages, etc., they're not necessarily how you build it. To help us to dive into the deeper discussion on this seemingly easy but somewhat misunderstood and a very important topic, we invited our special guest today, Sergio Baroni. Welcome to the show, Sergio.
Hello, Irina. Thank you very much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
You're an experienced psychotherapist with several decades of clinical practice working with adults, couples, families. You're also a hypnotherapist, which I didn't know about. You're a life coach and a specialist in rapid transformation of trauma healing, energy psychology, and applied self-love. I like that definition, Sergio, applied self-love. And I believe you coined this term and you are in the process of writing a book on the subject. So my question to you is, why is self-love so important?
Well, self-love is really, really important for a whole bunch of reasons. We are love-based beings who are having a need to express ourselves in the world, bring our best self out into the world, but without enough self-loving energy flowing through us, we essentially get in our own way. The fears, the anxieties, the insecurities, the traumas that we carry inside in our minds often get in our own way, and so we get into patterns that interfere with living our best lives, and that's why practices that are self-loving in nature are essential for us to live our best life.
Hmm. And what is your approach to this?
I use several approaches in my work that have to do with one, the first, the commitment to oneself and the recognition that love is a foundational essence for ourselves as human beings. So the commitment to discover, to learn about self-love is really important as a first step. And then from there, the engagement with the parts of us that feel caught up in fear, insecurity, that essentially are hiding from being feeling safe to come out in the world and express. And there's a need to essentially dialogue with those parts of ourselves and create more internal safety. And then from there, once we create more internal safety and more attunement to the heart, which is our central organ of self-connection, from there, once we're attuned to our heart, we become heart-based instead of just operating from our head all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Then we make a commitment to actual practices of daily self-care, which include things like not just things like, actions like, say, exercising more or drinking less or, eating better, things like that, but also practicing mindfulness, being there for ourselves in a mindful way and being compassionate when we fail, when we experience ourselves as fallible and we experience ourselves as, just being human, not being perfect.
So, self-love is often the hardest kind of love. And according to many evolutionary biologists, they say that there is a biological reason for it. So, and that is basically the need for survival, and that we are presumably born with the negativity biases. We're continually looking for dangers on the horizon. And as a result, we may tend to distrust the good things that come our way and even the good within us or within our lives. So we're oriented towards staying ahead of a danger, so to speak. But we obviously are not walking around a jungle full of predators. So, and you're saying that actually developing that particular skill on daily basis is how we can overcome to a certain degree that negativity bias that part of our brain is hardwired for.
Exactly. So if we talk about the neuroscience aspects, neuroscientists have already shown that practicing self-love practices actually increase the activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is the center of the brain that actually helps us with self-regulation, higher thinking, and all the things that help us be our better, higher functioning self. Practicing self-love also reduces activity in the amygdala, which when it's overactive, produces all that fear, all that anxiety, all that preoccupation with danger. So we already know scientifically that the self-love practices help us wire our brain to be the best functioning versions of ourselves, to be less fear-based and obviously more love-based.
Mm.
More intelligent and more love-based.
So, and just help me to understand, if we are fear-based and live our life in the fear-based state, so to speak, are you suggesting that in a certain, maybe simplistic way of saying it, that the other centers of our brain, the other centers of, like I would say, that gives us creativity, curiosity, the drive for, advancements a little, in a learning or professional field, and by decreasing that particular fear, we're almost like opening up more room, more energy, more, blood flow to those other centers that serve us better to create actually better and more wholesome and happier life?
Absolutely. When we engage in self-loving practices, we stimulate our brain to producing more dopamine. So automatically, we're naturally filled with feelings of pleasure and enjoyment and reward. We feel that we are being naturally rewarded from what we're doing in our life. So that reduces the stress, the anxiety, the competitive drives. All the negative drives associated with survival are reduced because we're flooded with dopamine. We also are, by being more self-loving, we're reducing cortisol in our system. So our stress system is actually deactivated. And so with all of that happening, we're more present. We're able to be more focused. We're positively engaged with ourselves and with others. And therefore, we're stepping out of autopilot. That negative chattering mind is subdued because we feel more connected with our positive wholeness, our positive sense of self.
That is really important, I guess. So I have also a question for you. Is there a big difference between self-esteem and self-love? Or is it the same as self-compassion? What is that
Yeah. Yeah, well, definitely there's a difference between self-esteem and self-love or self-compassion. I think self-love and self-compassion can be used interchangeably. I'll explain later, but with self-esteem is typically defined as an overall sense of judgment of ourselves, a positive sense of self-evaluation. So we can be, self-prideful. We can be even a sense of like, if I'm pleased with how competent I am, if I'm pleased with, that I think I'm smarter than other people or better than other people, that's often, kind of self-esteem, which we often can confuse with even self-inflation, people being kind of full of themselves, which is obviously not a very positive characteristic by other people's standards. We like to feel that people are not walking around just overly self-prideful and self-arrogant. So self-esteem is more like that, I'm self-approving. Whereas self-love actually often starts precisely when we feel that we've experienced some sense of loss, some profound sense of, either we feel alone in the world, we feel like we've lost ourselves, we've had a trauma, we've had some profound sense of betrayal, and we feel the need to connect with a power that is greater than our thinking mind. So that's the power of love. That's the power of our heart. And so it's the power of self-love is really transformational. It's not just the idea of, just using positive self-talk. It goes much deeper than that. It's really considered more of an alchemical capacity that we have within ourselves. We naturally go into a state of self-loving, self-healing, which transforms our relationship to ourself. Then that's where the compassion comes in, because we are compassionate toward that part of us that feels alone, separate, afraid, useless, valueless. We become compassionate toward that part of us, which I often refer to as the child mind. It's often that part of us that we have within us that we brought from our childhood. And that part of us is essentially confused. It's afraid and confused about what we really are, or what our inherent capacity or potential is. So we need to reach in and help that part of us understand and get a better bearing about what we're really up to with our life. So that's where the self-compassion comes in. Self-love includes self-compassion, and then self-love also includes empowered actions.
Empowered actions. So it's not like a passive process. Yeah.
Right.
And that you mentioned the childlike, or childhood, of course, timing. Are you saying that maybe that's when people start developing certain patterns that lead them to a lower self-esteem and a lack of self-love? Or does it develop later, when we start comparing ourselves to our friends, neighbors?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we know from child development studies, and we know from studies of personality, that all human beings develop core patterns in their childhood, essentially core coping patterns. This is how I start identifying myself in the world, so I can feel that I can survive, that I can feel some sense of that I can belong, that I'm okay. And most of the time, these patterns, there's always a fatal flaw with these patterns of behavior. In other words, there's always, we're trying to be we're trying to be helpful, we're trying to, become specialized in some way, but we miss our wholeness. We lose our capacity to be connected to our wholeness. And that's where you typically see people, like, for example, stuck in their heads. They're all about, trying to think good thoughts, or they're all about, I got to get my degree. I got to go to school, and I got to win people's approval, right? So approval seeking becomes, for many people, a substitute to actually feeling that sense of safety from feeling inherently lovable. And that's what is in so many people's child mind, as I put it. The child mind has lost a sense of connection to its own inherent lovability, and instead is just looking for ways to feel okay, that I have some sense of belonging, that I'm not going to be abandoned, that I can, that I can fit in. And that's a very different experience. That, as you can imagine, would bring about a continuous feelings of insecurity, anxiety, self-doubt. And of course, for some people, it turns like into toxic self-criticism. I'm just not good enough. I'm just not enough, no matter what I do, no matter how smart I get, no matter how good looking I am, no matter, how much people tell me I'm okay, I still don't feel that I'm okay. I mean, most people have some version of that feeling of I'm not enough. And that's precisely coming from that part of themselves that we become identified with, that is really just a part of our wholeness. We are operating from a sense of disconnection from our wholeness, and that hurts us.
Isolation. Yeah, that's why people tend to be more and more isolated, even being amongst crowds, or a lot of people. But the self isolation feeling is now really growing in the world, and people feel, of course, depressed.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, we've seen through the pandemic how much isolation increased, for obvious reasons. And we are social interpersonal beings. We need to feel connection. And now with, addiction to screens has become a huge problem, as you well know. And people are losing their ability to feel heartfully connected to themselves and each other. So that's why the increase in depression, anxiety, and so much of the indicators of personal unhappiness and distress are actually on the rise. Because what we need desperately is to have a greater access to our own feeling of connection to our wholeness, our authenticity, and to then bring that forward. So instead of isolating, we need to find ways of championing our ability to be heartful beings, to bring our heartfelt self, including our vulnerabilities, our sense of, our beautiful human fragility, even into our sense of the totality of our human experience. We all have vulnerabilities, we all have fragilities, and we need to find ways to be self-accepting about that. Otherwise, we're just going to feel like hiding and pulling back, and then we have the isolation. It's a huge problem.
It's so interesting you said that. I remember I was traveling in England, and in London I was passing by this big beautiful building, and it had a specific name of organization that occupied that building, and it said an Institute for Study of Loneliness and Isolation. So I couldn't believe it. So that
wow.
In a certain way, so maybe instead of studying that, we should study more of a self-love and how to get back to that feeling of wholesomeness, and that I am loved, and that I'm enough regardless of what I do, because we, as you said, start doing a lot of things to self-proof, so our existence, if you will. So, and it almost feels like self-love is a given gift, so from the God, universe, you name it. So it's our birthright. So, and we're kind of forgotten about it almost.
That's right. I mean, we, as you were talking about, we need to shift to a more positivity model of ourselves, which reminds me that even at Harvard, they institutionalized a program on what's called positive psychology. Positive psychology now is a burgeoning field within psychology that's all about focusing on how to help people be happier, more content, more self-honoring, self-respecting, rather than looking at ourselves always in that kind of pathology orientation, what's wrong with us and how to fix it. So there's positive psychology on the one hand. There's also, of course, spirituality, and a lot of the studies around how to bring more mindfulness, how to create more compassion for ourselves and for the world. Those are all, I think, what also my work draws on, because we need to. We have an epidemic of unhappiness in our world. We need to focus much more on what helps us feel positively connected to ourselves and positively connected to one another. And so we need to tap into these resources much more than ever before, because the world is becoming, there's more and more stressors for us to contend with. We need to become more resilient, and strengthening our connection to self. That's actually called, from some traditions, it's referred to as being strong-hearted. It's really, really important that we do that we open our heart, that we fill our heart with positive energies, that love energies flow in and out from us, and that we develop more strong-heartedness or more resilience.
Wow, that's really well said. So, Sergio, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
This podcast represents the personal views and opinions of the host and the guests and does not constitute medical advice. The statements contained in this podcast have not been evaluated by the FDA. Any products or treatments mentioned are not intended to diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. And now your host, Dr. Irina.
So now we're back discussing self-love with Sergio Baroni. So Sergio, I was wondering, what made you decide to focus your practice on self-love?
Well, that happened a long time ago when I was going through what we would call my dark night of the soul experience. I had a health crisis more than 25 years ago. And during that experience, I contracted Meniere's disease just out of the blue. And from that experience, which essentially from one day to the next, I started experiencing intense ringing of the ears, vertigo. It completely incapacitated me and caused me to feel like I was just losing control of my ability to function. And the symptoms became so severe, I had to be hospitalized. And as a result of that, then the doctors said, "Oh, you're probably going to lose your hearing. This is an incurable disease." And it was absolutely terrifying because constant nausea, constant ringing in the ears, constant, the room spinning. I was desperately, terrified that this was just going to be, my life was going to become a living nightmare. And during that time, I even had suicidal thoughts for the very first time in my life. And
Wow.
as a result of that, I kind of went into a deep depression. And during that period of deep depression, I had to really ask myself some deep, deep questions like, what is the point? What am I doing here? What is the purpose of my life? And if I do lose my hearing, if I have to suffer so much, what would make my life still worth living? And the only answer to that question that arose for me that turned my life around was this answer, that as long as I could give and receive love in my life would always be worth living.
Wow.
And that was the turning point. As soon as I got that download and I got really clear that was the answer for my life, then the energy of love intelligence was activated inside of me at a very deep level. And out of that came a renewed sense of power and hope. And with that sense of empowerment, I was able to actually look for and find holistic remedies that turn my condition around. And I was able to actually overcome this condition in ways that the regular medical doctors had never told me about and thought didn't even exist. So it was a radical discovery of what's possible when I engage with the power of love intelligence in my life.
Right. Yeah, this is a degenerative disease of the inner ear apparatus that is pretty much considered to be incurable in medical field. So, and it sounds like that miracle of discovery of self-love because you had nothing else left in a certain way, right? In your mentality. So, opened doors, opened curiosity, and opened your even willingness to go and seek some curative
and it
remedies.
opened up. There's studies that actually show that when we engage in self-loving practices, our intuition gets activated. There's other aspects of our intelligence that get activated. And that's what turned my life around. It was that intuitive sense of knowing and guiding myself toward answers that were previously hidden. And then all of a sudden, there's actually other possibilities. I started researching homeopathy and other natural remedies. And within days, I was actually able to, improve my symptoms on my own. And it was because that power, that self-loving intelligence was activating other parts of my mind, of my brain, to think more creatively, to see the world more intuitively. So that changed everything.
Wow. That is almost like a miracle, but
it was
I
a
guess
miracle.
you took and you took these actions, and now you're one of the gurus of self-love. So that is interesting. So, and you're saying that like authentic self-love by itself really works with difficult conditions like depression or anxiety?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry. Can you clarify your question?
Yeah, so like you're saying that such difficult conditions, like you were in this depressed state, so you had anxiety, obviously, right? So, but the self-love opened this possibility, if you will, and practically reversed your depression. So, and I just wanted to double check, what was that mechanism? Is there some like a different self-talk that you started using due to this feeling, or what are those practical, I guess, tips that you could share with us that maybe some of our listeners, would tap into, within their own mind resources, if you will, right? So what did it look like for you? And I'm sure you teaching your own clients, perhaps, some of these methodologies.
Absolutely. So I can talk about it in terms of just as an overview, or I can talk about it in terms of like different, different people that I've actually worked with, or I could talk about it
Yeah,
as what happened with me. What would you like for me to?
whichever makes sense to you. So
Okay. Okay.
you can give us
So
an
what?
example, yeah, of one of
Yeah,
your
yeah. So
clients.
what
Yeah.
happened for me was at the time when that realization came through, I realized I had to stop being so harsh with myself, and I had to start
Mhm.
talking to myself with kindness and with compassion. So I just literally just committed to talking to myself with kindness and with compassion, as though I was talking to a dear friend, as though I was talking to a child that was confused and scared. So that is one of the core practices, to actually engage in self-talk that is compassion based. So, which is, again, you're talking to that part of you that is afraid, confused, insecure. So you're being as kind, as gentle, as reassuring as possible. That's one key aspect of this practice. And then as you do that, you're being encouraging, you're focusing on the good. You're reminding yourself that there are aspects of your being that you can, feel good about or enjoy or respect or appreciate. And so you start focusing your attention on noticing the good in yourself, noticing what areas of your life are still, you could still positively engage in. And so for me, that was my commitment to service. My commitment to service was stronger than my fear of, personal loss and collapse. That's what I realized. And so I moved in the direction of, if this is going to help me, I bet it's going to help other people too. So helping myself became connected to my commitment with serving and helping others. And that is how I started. It was literally like climbing out of a dark hole, one step at a time, one step at a time, a little bit more encouragement, a little bit more encouragement, until eventually I was out of that dark hole and I was, finding my new bearings in life. It was literally like being reborn into a different orientation, that my orientation was now about being a loving, devotional being instead of, trying to avoid being so afraid. Very, very different orientation. So that's what I saw in myself, the transformation. And when I'm working with clients, there's often a lot of the same, a lot of the same steps are happening, because we're usually moving from the pattern of, I just want to check out from myself. I just want to numb out with drugs and alcohol. I just want to be, I'm stuck in my head. I have these repetitive thoughts. I'm just constantly blaming and shaming and criticizing myself. And there's first and foremost a commitment to just wait a minute, stop. Can you just start being there for yourself in a new way? Are you willing to learn how to be with yourself in a new way? That interrupts the pattern, And it starts opening the mind up to curiosity. How might it be possible? And then we focus from moving from the head to the heart. And the heart already has its own intelligence. The heart is a transformational vessel within us. So as soon as we shift from the head to the heart, we begin to have access to more intuition, to more capacity to see the greater good, to see our life as not just, we're not just this isolated part floating around in the universe. We are part of this magnificent universe. We're part of this magnificent world. We feel connection. So as soon as we start feeling connection, it fills us up with some sense of renewed possibility and hope. And then that energy sustains us into taking empowered actions like, okay, I need to stop drinking alcohol so much. I need to stop using those drugs and start, maybe join a 12-step group or doing other self-loving behaviors. So that's how it works. It's like step by step, we're orienting away from, being so fragmented and disconnected from the source that sustains us, moving in the direction of greater and greater connection to loving source.
Wow, I love that. So we're really looking forward to your upcoming book on applied self-love. And,
Thank you.
I really liked what you said, that it is such a magnificent universe. And one of my favorite quotes from famous poet Rumi, who said, "You're not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop." So
That's beautiful.
thank you so much for reminding us that we're the entire ocean in a drop. So, and it might, of course, help us all to shift our attention towards love and self-love, especially. So,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and we will have on our page for this episode some information how to find you if somebody is interested in talking to you in person. And just in brief, is there any easy access? Is it a phone number or email, website? So would you share with our listeners?
Sure. They can go to www.sergiobaroni.com, which has all the information of how they can reach me.
Okay.
And
we'll list that. And all right, thank you so much for being here and for this very nice discussion, Sergio. So
thank you, Irina.
Thank you. So thank you for joining us at Cures, Remedies, and Beyond, exploring science and the wisdom of health and healing. We hope to see you next time.